Okay.
The video now is being recorded and it will be posted on the Rising Coaches website
Okay.
where other coaches that are not able to make it now will be able to join in. Um, People kind of pop in and out. That's just kind of how it works because of time and requirements and all that. So with that said, I am joined by Miss Mandy. How do you say your last name, Mandy? I realize I don't want to mess that up.
Botham.
Botham.
It's like Gotham with a V.
Oh, there you go. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Coach Mandy. See, now you almost got me saying Gotham.
Sorry.
Coach Mandy Botham of the Red Deer Queens out of Canada. It's a pleasure to have you, Mandy. I am very excited for a couple reasons. One, I believe you are the second female I've had on the show. So, that's exciting. And I really want to learn and incorporate the international game. And by international, I just mean outside of the walls of the United States. Coaches kind of get their ideas and really sharing with the rest of us rising coaches on what are they doing, how they're different, how they're similar, and stuff like that. So with that said, I will turn it over to you so you can tell us exactly the background, the journey, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me on. I was really looking forward to being a part of this today. It's always nice to connect with basketball coaches from all over the world. And it amazes me how small our community is. And that's like one of the cool things I like about it. So I've been coaching basketball for 15 years total. My journey is a little different, I'd say, than the traditional route. So I coached a lot after I finished playing in college. I had a knee injury that stopped my playing career prematurely, unfortunately. And so I coached for a little bit and I enjoyed it. And then I got married, had kids, and I coached up until the time my eldest daughter was 1, and then took some time off just to work and be a mom and do more of their sports. And then about 8 years ago, I started to get back into basketball and just realizing how much I missed it. And it was always such a big part of my life. And then really started coaching again in 2012. I'm originally from Prince George, BC, and we have one university in Prince George. And I was really fortunate that I was actually at a summer camp, just watching my daughter in basketball camp when the women's coach, who we had played against each other in high school way back when, she saw me there and started chatting and said, we're really short coaches this week for camp. Do you want to jump in and maybe join us? So I did that, and it just reignited that passion. And I was very fortunate that she asked me to be on her staff that fall as an assistant coach. And I spent 2 years doing that, which was a tremendous opportunity to learn in the U sport level in Canada, or CIS. And that's the highest level of post-secondary basketball that we have in Canada. So I did that for 2 years. And then I was fortunate again to coach some provincial teams with Basketball BC, which is essentially the equivalent of like a state all-star team. So the best players of that age group from your state. And we would travel down to tournaments, End of Trail in Portland. We'd go to Vegas, things like that. And then we'd end up with a national championship of all the provincial teams and territory teams from Canada, and did that a couple of years. And then 2017, I got hired at Grand Prairie Regional College, which is in northern Alberta. And that's actually the school that I played college basketball for. So it was a really cool homecoming to come full circle from being a student athlete there and then to coming back and coaching. And I spent 2 years there. And then last season, the start of the 2019-2020 season, I accepted the job here at Red Deer College. The athletic director here has a ton of experience. She's worked for the Canadian Olympic Committee and been involved in Olympic Games and youth sport and CCAA and in a lot of the national sport organizations. And so I wanted to have the opportunity to be mentored and challenged by her. And so we had our first season with me as the new head coach last year here at Red Deer College. And so I'm preparing for hopefully another season coming up here, but with COVID, it's a little bit uncertain.
That is the unanimous the consensus around.
Yes.
So let's talk about, Mandy, that transition. What was
Okay.
that? What was that like for you? What are some of the things that you were afraid of, or that you were confident of switching into the main seat?
Yeah. Initially, I had a lot of things that worried me. I'm a bit of a planner and an organizer, so that fear of the unknown was exciting, but also a little bit terrifying at the same time. And a lot of the things I found were just things that I had to learn trial by fire. You know, I didn't know what I didn't know, so I couldn't even ask my athletic director or other coaches. A big thing for me was compliance and making sure that I was, you know, not breaking any rules. It would, you know, even if it wasn't an accidental thing, I just wanted to make sure I was always compliant, keeping things really above board with my recruiting. And one of the things I like to do is reach out to the other coach. If I have an athlete from another institution that's looking to transfer, that's kind of an unwritten rule, but I find that not all coaches will do that. And to me, it's a professional courtesy that I like to reach out and talk to the coach in person and let them know an athlete has reached out. And I think whenever you take over a program, you know, that you always feel some kind of pressure because they're either making a change because, you know, the previous coach maybe wasn't living up to expectations, or they were doing such a good job that now they've been snatched up by a school at a higher level and you have some really big shoes to fill coming in. And it can be a challenge to come in and coach athletes that someone else has recruited. I would say that was one of the biggest challenges. You know, as coaches, we tend to recruit personality types that we like. We have certain styles of play that we recruit for, and they might not necessarily fit when a new coach comes in. So a big part of my learning was just learning how to communicate with those players, you know, honestly give them feedback, kind of let them know where I saw their role was, and, you know, working with them to help build our program going forward, but still respecting what the previous coach had done.
All right, you kind of froze up there for a split second. So whatever that last sentence was, we did not get that.
Oh, I just said those were the biggest challenges that I faced when I was transitioning as a first-time head coach.
Now you talk about inheriting another coach's players.
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways that you went about reassuring them of what they brought to the table and how that's going to help you? In essence, recruiting them all over again to stay with the program. Because oftentimes guys come in, the coach that recruited them leave, and they basically exit the door as well.
Yes.
So what are some things that you did to recruit those guys, but still lay down what's your expectation as the new head coach?
Well, I can say that I really learned that lesson the hard way by not doing a very good job of it my first time at Grand Prairie. Some of the feedback that I'd been given when I was a younger coach and looking to transition into post-secondary was that I was too soft on athletes, too kind, and I needed to have a tougher facade, be stricter with them. And so when I got hired at Grand Prairie, I thought, okay, I need to come in and be very strict, very stern. It's my way or there's the door. And in hindsight, that really wasn't a great attitude to come in with as a head coach. And it's really not who I am as a person either. So I struggled with it because, it was the advice I was being given, and yet I didn't feel like I was being true to myself as a coach. And that really bothered me. So I learned a tremendous amount from that first experience. And when I came here to Red Deer a year ago in May, I had a lot of time to just think about the mistakes that I made and what I wanted to do differently. So the first thing I did was reach out and have individual meetings. I drove up to Red Deer, had meetings with all of the players from the previous team. And I just wanted to hear their experiences from last year, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they hoped and wanted heading into the new season. And then I rewatched all the games in their season 3 times over the course of the summer, once in preparation for the job interview, but twice afterwards, because I knew there were a couple of players that just wouldn't fit in with who I am as a coach. Their work ethic and their attitude just wasn't there. And so I had really tough, honest conversations with them ahead of time and just said, I'm going to be removing you from this team. However, if you want to come in the fall and try out as a walk-on with working on these things and showing me, an improvement in attitude and work ethic, teamwork, then I'm absolutely open to you possibly rejoining the team. And my athletic director is phenomenal, as I mentioned, and she gave me free rein coming in to keep all of the athletes, have a clean slate, some combination of the two, whatever I was comfortable with. And so after connecting with the athletes individually, I assigned them all a number, a 1, a 2, or a 3. And a 1 was, I'm confident with what I've seen from you in the season of play, in the meetings that we've had, as far as who you are as a student, as a person, as an athlete. And if you keep your training up, then you have a roster spot in the fall. The majority of the group fell into the second category, which was, you have potential. I think you could make our team. Here are the things I need to see from you improvement-wise before the fall. You can try out. You should be able to make the team if you keep this up. And then the third category was, no, you're just not a good fit for these reasons. And I would have to see massive improvements in these areas to bring you on. And the athletes appreciated that. They liked the honesty. They appreciated knowing where they stood in May for the upcoming fall. And then the last thing that I did to really try and make them feel welcome is I pushed our tryout date ahead, pushed it ahead by a week. And I brought in all the returning players for the first week with no recruits coming in, no walk-ons, none of the transfer athletes. And we just had 7 days of them being in the gym with me and getting used to how I coach, how I speak to them, my expectations, some of the drills that we were going to do in tryouts, because I really wanted to give everyone an absolutely fair opportunity to make the team. And the big part of that was because I did such a terrible job my first time with it at GPRC.
Hey, we adjusted. That's what we do.
Yes.
Mandy, can I jump in and ask you 2 things?
Yes.
So first off, my name is Menelik Fernandez. Pleasure to meet you formally. I'm at Fleming College, so I'm out in Ontario. I'm in the CCAA as well.
Okay.
I'm the interim head coach there and hoping to be the head coach next year. Took over halfway through the season last year. And then this is my daughter, London, who's making a camera appearance, apparently. Say hi.
Hi.
So the first of my questions is, with athletes that do demonstrate a pretty good a pretty good work philosophy overall,
Mm-hmm.
when they have lapses, how do you deal with those particular athletes? So as a for instance, I had a bad workout today with a couple of guys,
Mm-hmm.
and they're consistent. They show up all the time, proud of them overall. But when it's just not there, do you just shut it down? Do you finish and try to get the most out of them? Like, what's your philosophy about that? And then my second question is, being a CCAA coach, what, if any, recommendations would you make if you were the person who is a decision maker to make any sort of changes that you see in our league that could be for the positive?
Good questions. Congrats on being the interim head coach, by the way.
Appreciate it.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. And hopefully you get to remove that interim tag and be there.
Who knows what's happening at this point, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It seems to change day to day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're sorry to just kind of dwindle here, but like, we're not really even getting any feedback at this point right now. It's just kind of big gray area, right? So like the CCAA, I'm sure, is instructing, like, are you ACAC? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've heard that your board is like speaking more frequently with the coaches. I'm getting nothing from the OCAA right now. And like, even my administration, nothing really. So
yeah. Oh, that's frustrating.
For sure.
I can talk more about that after I answer your other two questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. First question, I've found that, it really depends on the athlete, how I respond to that. Some of them need me to yell at them in practice in front of their teammates and kind of challenge them. And that's what they want. And it gets that fire going. Sometimes I pull them out of a drill and have a quiet but stern word with them. And if it's a lingering thing, like, we've had practices before where their heads just haven't been in it, or, they're too silly. They're talking, they're goofing around, they're not giving a focused effort. Then I usually get upset and shut it down and say, we'll discuss it the next day before practice, because I don't ever want to go in and say things that I'm going to regret because I'm emotional and upset and angry with them. But because I'm pretty laid back off of the court, and when they're doing the right things, my demeanor is usually pretty calm. So when I do get angry and shut it down and kick them out of the gym, it's very effective, because it's not something I do every day.
Right.
But I would say, if it's a new group of athletes, or, you have a kind of a mix of some like a quiet side conversation, some like it out loud, that I just stop practice and say, look, you're doing this, this, and this. It's not acceptable. It's not a part of the team standards that we set. Because I like to have collaborative goal setting at the start of the year. And I call them standards as opposed to rules in my dictatorship, because if I give them that ownership of creating the standards with me, then we're all held to those standards. And it's not just, coach being a grumpy jerk again and trying to enforce those rules. Hopefully that answers your question a bit.
It does very well. I'm always curious to know what other people's teaching methods are in those kinds of scenarios, for sure.
Yeah, I read a good book recently, actually, and I want to try it and see how it'll work. And coaching women, and the particular group of women that I have right now, I think it'll work well. And it was talking about, instead of getting angry, instead of pulling them out of the drill and telling them all the horrible things that they're doing wrong or not doing, pulling them aside and saying, you're not giving me your best right now. I know what you're capable of, and I'm not seeing it, and that's not okay. I want to see your best, instead of focusing on that negative, just to try and put it in a positive light. So I have a few athletes, I think, that would respond really well to that approach.
It's interesting that you say coaching. So like, I've done both. I was at York 2 years men's side, 1 year women's side, and 1 year I was under Erin McAleen, and like Erin's stern. She's tough. She's but she's good. She knows what she's doing, for sure. And it's interesting because the dynamic definitely is different, but I find that people on the ladies' side are quite a bit more adept to the little, you're not giving me your best, showing that you care, etc. Whereas with guys, it's almost like you need the yelling and screaming, almost demeaning sometimes to get guys going sometimes, which is not my coaching style. So sometimes I struggle with that.
That would be a challenge for sure.
Yeah. And then, sorry, the second half, just revisiting, I know it's long-winded, but if you were the decision maker for our overall league, what kind of pros, cons would you suggest for positive change in the CCAA overall?
One of the biggest things for me would be a centralized letter of intent / recruiting hub, like a live document that people could view and you could only input, under your school, because it's something that, we can have an issue with in the ACAC. There's been a few cases where kids have actually deliberately played a few schools off each other, fully knowing I want to go to this school and play for this coach, but I'm going to squeeze as much money as possible by working these other two coaches and hoping that they just don't talk to each other.
Right.
So I think that, from an ethical standpoint, that would really improve our league and even just improve relations between coaches. We're so competitive when we're on the court, but off the court, I found that most of them are actually quite collaborative and enjoy doing things like this and sharing ideas or helping each other problem solve. And recruiting seems to be a bit of a sore spot. So I think if we could kind of clean that up, then it would help the overall professionalism of our league.
Mendel, just for you and for anybody else listening or watching later, in Canada, like Mandy said, we have a university and a college league, and the university league is considered superior talent-wise. The college league does not have a transfer rule. So quite literally, you could play until Christmas for one school, transfer and play for another for the second half of the year. And at the end of the year, you can transfer, go anywhere you want and not sit out for a year. So when Coach Mandy was saying that, she makes a point of speaking to other coaches and, hey, this athlete has expressed an interest. I don't know how it is where you are, but in Ontario, that would be the exception, not the standard. It's the Wild West here, really. So.
Well,
I would.
Go ahead, Mandy.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it's definitely the exception here and not the rule. Coaches are really surprised when they pick up the phone and find out why I'm calling. It's nice. It's been a good way to get to know coaches because they appreciate that. And in the ACAC, we actually do have transfer rules. So you can't play for two institutions in the same academic year. But what they do allow is they give the student athletes one free transfer. So they can attend one school for as long as they want in their 5 years of eligibility, and then transfer to another college in the CCAA, which is our national league. So any college in the country without having to sit out any time. But if they choose to transfer a second time, so it would be the third school, then they would have to sit out a full academic year before they could play.
I like it. Two things for you, Mandy. One, what is the name of the book?
Oh, I'm going to have to look it up.
Okay. Do that and let us know, because I'm definitely, I can be over the edge at times. I'm trying to soften off my edges. So
yeah. Okay.
Definitely something to have. The other thing is the recruiting. You guys brought up the recruiting, kind of good segue into my next question for you. What is your process when you're recruiting a player?
It's interesting because, obviously with COVID, things have changed so much. There's no, club basketball in Canada, or not as much AAU in the States, and we can't travel to watch them play. So typically I like to get to know athletes when they're, younger, like grade 8, grade 9, and just kind of build that relationship with them so that, they see me come to their games and they'll come over afterwards and talk, or they'll attend our basketball camp on campus here. I like to invite them and their high school teams to our games to be our guests. We do a lot of community stuff like that, where we'll give them a tour of our facility. Say on game day, they can come and watch us at our shoot. And then we let them in the locker room after the game most times. And they get to ask the student athletes questions. And I've just found that building that solid foundation and relationship with the athletes when they're younger, getting to know their parents and their coaches, it really helps me weed out athletes that are going to be a problem for me down the road, because I can see how they're treating referees or opponents or their parents when they're 14, 15 years old. And if they're, if they're being disrespectful or, negative things out on the court, then those are some things that I have a zero tolerance for, no respect, having a poor work ethic, having a poor attitude. So it helps me to weed them out. And as much as possible, I like to get some film to watch them. I hate highlight tapes. I refuse to watch them, as much as the kids hate that, because they get all the music in and the highlights and the editing. But I want to see a full uninterrupted game, because that gives me a better picture. And I like to talk to their parents and talk to the student athlete with the parents there about their grades and their attendance at school, their career goals. I would say recruiting takes up a significant amount of my time year round, because in order to get to know those kids as well as I like to, it's a huge job. And then, when you start thinking about recruiting internationally, that's a whole completely different other thing. Looking for players from the States or from Europe or wherever that can come and make a difference for your program, that's a whole different side of recruiting.
Let's go international.
Okay.
With all the challenges that come with the bringing someone international, what do you do? Because I'm sure you can't go out and watch them. Depends on where they're coming from, obviously.
Yeah.
So do you have certain countries, or you build relationship with some coaches internationally that kind of lets you know what's going on? What's that process like for you?
Yeah, I had no experience with international recruiting when I was first hired at Grand Prairie Regional College. And, I quickly realized that if I was going to have a competitive team, it would be in my best interest to add some international athletes. From a basketball standpoint, from a culture standpoint, they bring so many positives to the team. And I didn't have any connections or, any kind of real idea how to do that. So it was very humbling, but I just reached out to other coaches internationally. I sent emails, I made phone calls, and just introduced myself, told them that I was new, wanted to kind of build relationships. And most of them I didn't hear back from, which was okay. But the few that I did, I've been able to form relationships with. I currently have 2 athletes that I've recruited from Stockholm, Sweden. And so I got to know one of their coaches really well. And it's nice because with this lockdown going on, my 2 athletes can go and train with him in his gym. And we'll have a FaceTime set up where he has one of his managers or, one of the younger players just kind of follow my 2 athletes around the gym, and him and I communicate on the things that I want them to work on. So I can actually see them real time doing things and give them feedback, even though they're halfway across the world. And it's made for some cool connections, because that coach in Stockholm wants to come over here during the season and, practice with us and be a part of our games, and vice versa. One day when the COVID restrictions are lifted, I hope to go to Stockholm, be able to go get in the gym with him and learn. So yeah, for me, it was just being humble and making those phone calls and sending those emails.
That's interesting, because I don't know if I've ever heard coaches connecting overseas like that. So that's definitely great to hear. As always, gentlemen, put it out there. If you have questions, jump on right in, because it's not about me. It's about us as a community. Mm-hmm. So get as much as you can from her.
Real quick one. Mandy, first off, I want to say you are correct. You can't transfer halfway through the year. I just looked it up. Same thing, OCAA. Second thing, you can do transfer without the sitting out of the 1 year, like you said. But to your point about what you were just talking about, when you started reaching out to coaches internationally, what was sort of your process? Like, were you looking at clubs internationally? Were you finding websites that listed all the teams that you thought could potentially you could recruit from? Sort of describe like how you went through that.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting process. I haven't really shared this with too many people, but my first year at Grand Prairie, we were rebuilding. We didn't have a very strong team. We did not win very many games at all. And it was really stressful. I don't know many people who get into coaching that aren't competitive and want to win all the time. So to pass the time in some of those sleepless nights when I was stressing because we weren't winning and, worrying about my contract being renewed, I just started looking on the internet in the middle of the night. And I found that some of the clubs in Sweden would live stream their games, and they would live stream them, which was in the middle of the night for me. But because I wasn't sleeping anyway, I just started watching them, and I would hear a word and write it down and then go to Google Translator to try and figure out what they were talking about. And, I assessed the caliber of the league and knew that the best players in that league, a lot of those girls were going Division I in the States. So I actually started to look for the girls who in that league and on those teams were average. And I knew that if I could connect with them and bring them over to my league, they would be superstars over here. And it was a lot of time and a lot of effort, but I managed to get 2 recruits out of it, which, if you compared the number of hours and phone calls and emails, is probably a really horrible success rate, but I look at it as a success.
I would disagree. If they're key players, then it's a huge success, right? And just like if you think about the experience that you've provided them because of being able to do that online, like they're international, playing a game they love, getting a good education, right? Meeting new people,
Yes.
all that. So invaluable.
Yeah, it's been win-win for sure.
One of the main problems that coaches face today is balancing work and family time.
Yes.
As a new mom and coach and head coach and all that pressure, how do you balance that for yourself, and how do you set the tone for your assistant coaches to kind of help them balance out life outside of basketball?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Truthfully, I don't have great work-life balance. I love basketball. So even if I have a day off in the middle of the off season where there's nothing I have to be doing, I will choose to watch recruit film or, make some phone calls and connect with coaches just because I'm so passionate and I love it so much. And that definitely drives my children a little bit crazy. They get frustrated sometimes when we sit down to watch a movie and I've got my laptop open and I'm watching film, pretending to watch the movie on the TV. So my kids are older now, so that's a blessing. And they have their own voice. So we've come to the agreement that I set aside a certain amount of time every day in the off season, not necessarily every day during the season, where we can just spend time playing games, watching a show, doing something active, going and visiting. And unless it's a crisis with one of my athletes, then I'm not on my phone. No matter the emails or the texts that come through, I just leave it. And I've really made an effort to do that, I would say, the last 6 months. And I have noticed a big difference in, just the quality of the relationships with my kids. And also I don't feel as burnt out. As much as I love basketball, it is nice to kind of unplug, even if it's just for a couple of hours, and be present and thinking about something else. And my assistant coaches, I have 2 fantastic assistant coaches. One is a mom and one is not. She's a younger coach who just finished her playing career 2 years ago. And my best advice to them is always do as I say and not as I do. So when they have things like, you know, they'll mention, oh, my nephew's birthday is tomorrow and we're doing a barbecue tomorrow night, so do you mind if I leave practice early? I'll say, no, don't go to practice. You need to be at your nephew's barbecue. Like, we'll be fine. I'm here. And just encouraging them not to miss those moments in their life, or get to the point where they resent basketball because they're doing it too much and it's taking away from their family life and their home life. So I try to give them better like work-life balance than I have.
All right, fair. Next topic that I want to talk to you about is the part, kind of still with the recruiting, but you mentioned earlier, if an athlete reach out to you and show interest, you reach out to that coach. Mm-hmm. Are you at all worried that the athlete now is viewing you as a tattletale, for lack of a better term here, sorry, because maybe that's something they were trying to do without the coach knowing, fearing retaliation on that end?
Yeah.
Or do you have that conversation with the athlete first, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I do have that conversation with them first, because they're not going to be familiar with our league's operating code. It's huge, it's dry, it's difficult to navigate. I hate it when I have to go and look things up in it. So I guarantee none of the student athletes look in it. So that's the first thing that I'll say is, you know, if it's an email or a phone call and I'm not familiar with the player, I always Google them and see if they were on a roster the year before. And once they've kind of finished their introduction, if it's on a phone call, I just say to them, you know, before we can talk, I need you to know that this is the rule according to the operating code. If you make contact with me and you're on a roster of another team, I have to let my athletic director know, who will let your athletic director know. And just as a personal standard for me, I will give your coach a call and let him know. So, you know, if you want to continue the conversation, that's what has to happen. And, you know, if you're not at that point yet, then we should not be speaking. And if you get to that point, by all means, give me a call. So I've been fortunate that I've never had any athletes who were upset that I reached out to their coach. They've always told their coach beforehand, or had already left the team or been cut or whatever the reason was. So yeah, touch wood, I haven't been in that position yet.
There you go. Now, mentally kind of separate the college league and the university league. What is the next step for you? Do you aspire to make it to that higher level, or you want to be successful at the college level where you are now? What's the goal, let's say the next 5 years?
I'm a really competitive person, so I'm always looking at what's the next achievement. What can I do to be better? You know, where's the next level to go to? So I do aspire to coach at the youth sport level in Canada. I've thought about coaching in the States even, you know, in the NCAA, if I could get a position there. And eventually I'd like to coach pro athletes, whether they be men or women. I've coached both in the past, and I think that's kind of the ultimate goal, would be to get to that professional level, just because that's the best. And I'm so competitive that that's where I want to be.
There you go. Topic that is dear to my heart, player development.
Yes.
What's the process for you and the Queens?
Yeah. So, sorry, I think I froze there for a minute.
Yep. You okay? Talk to me. Player development. Let's do this.
Okay. That was an area that I felt we really needed to improve on here. So again, that involved watching a lot of the film and watching it specifically for certain, you know, each individual athlete. And we do some baseline fitness testing to check strength and vertical leap, cardio endurance, things like that. So that's a part of it too. But it was really just me analyzing their game and looking for areas where they needed to improve or things they needed to add to the game. And so it was a really lengthy process to be able to do that in depth for all of my athletes. But as I learn, continue to learn as a coach, it was something that I really enjoyed doing, was breaking that down and seeing what skills they needed to improve, what things they needed to add to their game. And so I like to take videos. Well, I have my assistants actually take videos in practice. And if I see them, if their shot's funny or they're doing something on offense, I'll get them to film it on the iPad. And then I'll pull the player out and just say, you know what, you're missing your shots right. I want you to watch your elbow or, your pinky finger when you're releasing the ball. And being able to show them that video has really helped for a lot of kids, because a lot of them are visual learners. And so giving them that verbal feedback or, even moving their elbows or their hands for them, it doesn't do the same as them being able to see the mistakes they're making and then understand the corrections. And, as far as I go, I like to think of myself as, I'm constantly evolving, constantly striving to get better. So I watch a lot of videos of trainers online. I read a lot of articles. I look at a lot of drills. I watch game film, or, when you have someone present at a coaching clinic and talk about drills they do to work on a specific area. So I built up a Google Drive that's full of basketball things, but one of the folders is player development. And I've just tried to break it down by skill, by drill, and then kind of tier it. So you'd have a base level drill, and then you load it a little bit as they get better and load it a little more and a little bit more. But it's constantly evolving for me. So I hope this year, again, depending on COVID, that I can get more gym time, either individually or as a small group, to work on the individual skills and player development outside of practice, because we just don't have the time to get it done in team practice.
How long is your practice usually?
It's
or
usually
is there a max that you guys can't exceed?
We actually don't have those rules in Canada. We're kind of fortunate that way. So it's more just the mercy of the facility and what we get available. So for us, a typical practice is an hour and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
So give me the breakdown of a practice for you guys in that hour and a half, typically?
We come in, we cheer. I speak for maybe 30 seconds about what we're focusing on or emphasizing today, just so they kind of have a high level overview. And then they start their dynamic warm up. And as they start doing that warm up, usually I'm talking about, if it's in season, talking about our opponent for that upcoming weekend and what aspect we're going to focus on in practice tonight. Sometimes I use that time to check in with them, like individually. I'll just kind of walk beside one of them and, ask them about a class they were having trouble with, or, boyfriend, girlfriend troubles, whatever it may be. So make that connection. And then once we get through the dynamic, I like to start with some kind of a shooting drill where we just start in close and kind of move out a little bit, just so they can get some touches, get some shots up, get their body moving. And then we go into a really high intensity part of the practice. We'll work on transition or work on our press break, anything that's going to get us moving up and down the court really fast. And then most of our water breaks, I've taught them to treat it like a timeout. So I get our manager to put 1 minute up on the clock and say, you've got 1 minute for water, because I found that they were just taking their time and stretching it into 3-4 minutes of socializing and checking their phones. And that really drove me crazy. So I said, we need to get quick at this. We have a minute in a game for you to come to all the way to the bench, hear what I have to say about adjustments, and get back out. So I give them that 1 minute timeout. And then typically after that, we'll move into a teaching phase of the practice. So they're warmed up, they've been running, you know, my hope is that their minds and their bodies are engaged. They've had a bit of water. So then I move into teaching, you know, and that could be offense, defense, blobs. Usually it's adjustments for our opponent in a weekend. And then after that, we spend some time every practice working on our different defenses. You know, usually some kind of a variation of a shell drill, just so that I make sure we're prepared for certain, you know, certain coverages, like how we're defending ball screens, or, you know, a skip or whatever may be for our opponents. And then every drill that I do in practice, I like to make it a competitive one. So there's always a score or a goal. There's always winners and losers. And not that I make them run every time they lose by any means, but when I took over the program, there was a lack of that competitiveness in the program, and they had gotten used to not winning, and they were just so complacent about winning, losing, competing. They had just accepted their lot as, you know, worst in our division. And so one of the ways I tried to combat that was make absolutely everything competitive. And it's been successful. We improved our record, and we, you know, I've seen improvement within the athletes. So do that. And then I like to finish practices with some kind of game-like scenario. So I really put the pressure on them to perform. Otherwise, usually they'll have to run or, you know, do some kind of physical task that they really don't want to do at the end of practice. So that's kind of help us in those pressure situations in games be able to execute, because you know, I try as much as I can to simulate that in practice for them.
I like it. I like it. So next question, kind of the going back on the journey, looking at everything you've gone through and everything that you know now, what are two things, if you were to have a conversation with your younger self, what are two things, two advice, two do's and don'ts that you would give your younger self?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first one would be, you know, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, seek out a mentor or mentors who are willing to just share their experiences with you, so that you don't have to learn everything the hard way. Because I didn't really do that, and I made a lot of mistakes that I didn't need to make. If I had just had the courage to ask someone if they would mentor me that way. And I'm fortunate now that I've kind of gotten over that fear, and I do have some great mentors in my life. But looking back, there were a lot of things I could have prevented myself and my team from going through if I had done that. The second thing, and this was a tough one for me to learn, you talked about it a little bit before, is being able to adjust. You know, coming in, I took great pride in having my practice plans and my yearly plan and, you know, season plan. And I knew exactly what we were going to do every moment of every practice. And I could tell you in September what we'd be doing November 15th. And that's just not the reality at all, you know? And that was really tough as someone who likes to plan and be organized. You know, I had all of this great color-coded stuff, and it all quickly went out the window very fast. And I learned that probably the biggest skill I needed to have was the ability to just roll with what was happening and make adjustments on the fly in practice, when you're traveling, certainly in games. That it's not a job where you're coming in 9 to 5 doing the same thing every day. So
that is true.
That was a big one for me that I needed to learn.
Okay. Comparisons, similarities between what you see in Canada and what you see internationally. And by international, I mean outside of the walls of Canada, remove the United States.
Okay. It's interesting in Canada, in my opinion. I think that a lot of coaches at the college level where I coach, we all do a variation of the exact same thing. So, it's like we've come up, right? Yeah, you're agreeing with me. Menelik gets it.
Literally, I like when I look at scouts sometimes, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you're running our stuff. Okay.
Yeah, great. Okay.
It's
horns, ball screen, flare screen. Got it. Okay,
yeah,
good.
exactly. And you know what zone they're going to run, and they're going to run pack, and what press they're going to do. Like it boggles my mind. And I also feel that Canada is very big on ball screens. Like if all else fails, just a good old ball screen is the answer to any situation you might find out. Like even when it's an end of game situation, whether it's a baseline, a sideline, or if breaking a press or a half court set, pretty much guarantee there's going to be at least one ball screen in there. So in that sense, it makes it easier in preparing, but it also gets kind of boring after a while, seeing the same old stuff, team after team and year after year with some coaches. And not that I'm saying that's a bad thing, but they know their systems, and they're the type of coach that this is what we run. I recruit players to fit this system, make very little changes year to year. And yeah, I just wish there was a little more variety. So one of the things I really like to do is try and watch basketball from all over the world, like watch FIBA Asia, watch Europe, watch Africa. And it's really interesting to see completely different concepts that they do. And I find that Canada tends to catch up, but we're a couple years behind. When they're doing something, by the time it gets to Canada, we're a couple years behind. So I really try and look at stuff outside of Canada and think, how could I adapt that for the athletes that I have so that it's something different? And it's going to force my opponents to, struggle. They're going to have to watch a lot of film if they want to figure out everything we're going to run. And I'm confident that that's going to give me a bit of an advantage, either because they don't have the time to watch as much film as they need to, or they're not willing to, or not able to. And I just find it so refreshing. The concepts are different. It's not the same old thing coming down the floor. So yeah, I would say those are the biggest differences for me.
Menelik, you want to jump in and give us yours while we at it?
Yes.
I would definitely agree with a lot of what was just said, for sure. We definitely don't have a lot of creativity, innovation happening, in my opinion, as well. So you'll see a lot of teams are basically running same type stuff. It's like, okay, you watched a championship productions video one time and that's what you're running. I get it. And that's what you're going to continue to run. And I think a large problem that we have is that, like, we're only now beginning to have a top-down model where it's like we now have 2 pro leagues in Canada. So it's becoming a legitimate thing that you can play pro basketball in Canada. But like the prep school model only sort of showed up about 4 or 5 years ago here. There's still, like, Ontario as a province comparative to anywhere else in the country, there's still a lot of politics that happens in terms of what the structure of basketball should be, and having to belong to which organization and who collects dues and who sets the rules, etc. So because of that, like, it's a complex environment. Like, somebody like Mandy strikes me as being somebody who is not just competitive, but almost like possessed. Like, she loves this. Like, she, it's something that's near, and I share that. To me, like, I love it. I want to put in the time. This is what I want to do. Unfortunately, in Canada, most of us, especially at the college level, are not paid full time.
No.
So this is a big obstacle. So, like, a lot of the best coaches who share that passion just simply don't have the time to be able to watch the kind of video that they need to be able to watch in order to instruct the way that they need to instruct. So there's a lot of things top down that are huge challenges here. Like, Gym time is like, it's absurd here. It's
Yeah.
just absolutely really challenging to find gym time in certain cities in this country. So, I mean, there's a lot of obstacles we have to overcome, but I'm happy that there are people who share the same sort of, drive, competitive edge. I like
Yeah.
kind of coach that you'd love to share notes with, but hate to see across the sidelines, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Because it's going to be a battle.
Yep. And you're totally right when you said possessed about basketball. That is 100% me. I love it.
I share it, believe me.
That's awesome.
He does. Mandy, it is 4:27 now. An hour have gone by that quick.
Wow. Yeah.
So I always end every Beyond the X's and O's with this question. When you are with social media and everything happening right now in the world, how do you deal with your players, I should say, rather, and the best approach about social media? Because we all know there are pros and there are cons to using it. So what is your philosophy on that?
I try to be different, a little outside the box. And so I know my athletes, pretty well. And I feel like I know what they need. And in my opinion, what they need right now more than anything is just support and reassurance that whether we have a season or not, or, they're able, my internationals, to fly back into Canada or not, that regardless of that basketball piece, I'm still supportive of them. And it's important to me that they see that I'm still working as hard as I would any other year. And I'm preparing for a full season until we hear otherwise. And hopefully we don't. So I like to kind of mix the media a bit because I don't want them to get bored. So we do different things, like we do a video chat on Zoom once a week, a team chat. And every second week it's basketball specific. So we had one this morning where we were starting to set our team goals for the upcoming season. So they had a little bit of homework coming in to present on what they thought we should look at, our goals, which become our standards for the year. I do like to connect with each of them. I phone them a lot. I text them. I try to connect with them on their level. So I will send them memes all the time when I see one that, makes me think of them, or usually they're NBA memes because I love watching the NBA, but it's a way for us to be connected. And they tease me like, "Coach, you're too old to be sending memes. Like, what are you doing?" But, it makes us laugh and it gets them talking. And I like to think that with all of the COVID stuff, on the news and on our social media channels and people talking about it, that, we can still just connect as people and find out what's going on in their life, or, what they're planning for their studies, or do they have a place to live when they come back on campus, or, sometimes we'll do it where I'll say, okay, next week you have to come prepared to talk about, your favorite book, what it is, why you like it, and, kind of some key takeaways about it. So just little things like that to keep them on their toes. We also did a virtual game of horse, which went on for 6 weeks, which was pretty cool. So they had to film themselves as they were playing horse, and there was a little bit of trash talking in the videos, and they would put them all in the group chat, and it was just kind of a fun way to stay connected as a team while we're scattered all over the world.
I like it. Coach Mandy, if anybody would like to reach out to you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, my email address, you can reach me through my school address, like at the college. It's Mandy with a Y .Botham, BOTHAM @rdc.ab.ca. You can just Google Red Deer College and women's basketball. You can find me that way, or I can leave my contact info with you, Mandel, if that's okay. You can give me a call, send me an email. I love connecting with coaches, so I'd be happy to connect with anyone if they're interested.
Fantastic. Mandy, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it. Again, this will be on the Rising Coaches platform for anyone that missed it. And if we can ever help you in any way, please let us know. Let me know. You have Mr. Menelik with you, holding the torch in Canada. So,
Yes.
you know, but as soon as I possibly can, I will definitely make a trip out there to be part of what you guys have going on out there. I'm so thankful. Thank you and everybody that checked in. We appreciate it. See you guys next week. Bye, Mandy.
Bye. Thank you very much.